And an aide in the George H.W. Bush White House, and MSNBC contributor James Peterson, director of Africana Studies and associate professor of English at Lehigh University. Gentlemen, quite a bit to discuss today, even on a holiday. Let's start with this controversial UN vote on Israeli settlements. We heard Donald Trump weigh in on this. We heard, for example, from the Israeli ambassador, Ron Dermer, last hour. I want to play both of you a little bit of what he said to me, and then we'll talk about it. Listen.
The real story is how an outgoing president would fundamentally change U.S. policy towards Israel in the waning days of the administration. Imagine that President Bush, on his way out the door, a month before he leaves office, decides to move the embassy to Jerusalem, to recognize Israel's annexation over the settlement blocks. Would then everybody be saying, well, we only have one president at a time? Of course not. They would say, look, you're undermining and handcuffing the next administration.
James, let me start with you here. Do you agree? Is President Obama handcuffing the administration and President-elect Trump before it even begins?
No, I don't think so. I think when you look at the language, particularly here of Ambassador Samantha Power, the Obama administration really feels as if the expansion of settlements in Israel undermines the security of Israel. Now that's a kind of a nuanced take on a very, very complex problem, but that's the stance that they're taking. I think one thing that gets left out of this conversation all the time, Hallie, is that there are human rights abuses going on in Israel, directed at the people of Palestine, and folks who really believe in a two-state solution believe that the settlements are standing in the way of progress towards a two-state solution. So it's kind of complicated, but I think the Obama administration is saying, hey, for 50 years, for 3 or 4 decades, the United States has been against settlements in Israel. This is just making a much more pronounced position on a very, very complicated issue.
Well, Joe, let me ask you this. The ambassador also pushed back on the idea that President-elect Trump was atypically getting involved in matters of international diplomacy, either him or one of our guests calling it, I think, a sideshow. Do you think it is noteworthy that President-elect Trump has not been silent and has, in fact, been pretty vocal about all this, even though he's not in the White House yet?
Well, I think that President Obama has the right as the sitting president of the United States to to enact policy on behalf of the United States as he sees fit, and that would be the right of every sitting American president until the day when a new president takes office. With regards to President-elect Trump, he's done many things that are counterintuitive. Certainly, beginning with his campaign and the general election, and even now as the president-elect, he's done a lot of things that that his predecessors have not done. He's made statements. He's gotten involved. He's been very outspoken on a number of issues, and clearly on this one, he's signaled where he stands. Very different, very counterintuitive from what past presidents have done, but nonetheless, this is the style that this new president has chosen to take.
Let's talk a little about the incoming administration's and President-elect Trump's positions, if you will. The AP has this great write-up out today, interesting write-up, looking at all the ways in which Donald Trump has some similarities to that which he attacked Hillary Clinton for. So, for example, Goldman Sachs. You've seen Donald Trump put in Goldman folks into his administration. Big donors, for example, not holding press conferences, something that he went after Hillary Clinton for. We obviously haven't seen a Donald Trump press conference in, I think, 150 days. Family ties, et cetera, et cetera. Joe, should this be a concern, frankly, for Donald Trump, that something like this could, in fact, be written about him?
Well, I think that it's still early, and obviously he's going to set his own tone. We know him to be a very independent thinker. He's not at all tied to what past presidents, as I said earlier, have done, and we ought not expect him to move forward as past presidents have done. With regards to holding press conferences, with regards to who he appoints, he's made some I think, very solid appointments to his cabinet. He's made some other appointments to the cabinet that are much more controversial and where lots of people are worried. But he's going to move forward as he sees fit. So this is somebody who can't be put in a box, somebody who is willing to be, again, if I overuse the word, counterintuitive, but it's worked for him. I mean, it's got him elected president of the United States.
James, we've seen the president-elect over the weekend announce he... Go ahead, respond to that.
Yeah, we're not trying to keep him in a box. I mean, I think it's fair for the American people to hold President-elect Trump to the promises that he made during the campaign. He's not behaving in a counterintuitive way. He's just being counter to what he said during the campaign. So, I mean, when you take, even just with the previous thing that we were just talking about, I mean, the reality is if you're pro-Israel, you should be against the anti-Semitism and the anti-Semitic attacks that have been on the uptick in this nation over the course of his transition campaign. You can't appoint someone like Steve Bannon, someone who's associated with Breitbart, a website that's been accused of being anti-Semitic, and then want to be pro-Israel. So there are things that President-elect Donald Trump is doing counter to what he said and what he says he stands for, and I think it's right for the American people to question that.
James, on that, quickly before I let you go, he said he wanted to try to avoid the appearance of conflict of interest. Over the weekend, he announced he would dissolve the Trump Foundation and take that step. Is that enough for you? Does that alleviate some of the concerns that you have for him about him starting to untangle these conflict questions?
I mean, absolutely not. I think he's forced to close the foundation. I mean, just look what he's dealing with. $250,000 of the foundation money used for a lawsuit, $20,000 to Pam Biondi, another $20,000 or more for a portrait that he hung in his own facility. I don't think he can sort of escape the noose of the complications with the foundation. But I think, again, the American public is really looking at the Trump corporate organization and wanting to see him disentangle himself from the corporate conflict of interest that sort of emerges as a president-elect of the United States with his many business dealings around the world. And so we shouldn't be distracted by the foundation. It should be closed given the investigation that it's under in New York and given the challenges that I just listed out. But we also have to be very vigilant about Trump's corporate entity and the ways in which conflict of interest will animate his corporate interests going forward over the next 4 years. James
Peterson, Joe Watkins, thank you both for being with us here. Appreciate it. Turning now to a different story, the death of singer George Michael. Tributes, candles, crowds, all of it filling the space outside the pop star's England home. Fans are really grieving the loss.